And she told me how she had protested with friends and how the Chinese military had opened fire in the first instance, using tear gas. And then in the confusion when people were running, they opened fire. This particular person had the ability, she ran away, hiding into the back streets of Lhasa, and then hid with friends. And each night that group of friends would sit huddled around the television watching Lhasa State National TV, and they would see every night the images of the most wanted. And those images had been taken from the surveillance cameras that were in 2008 already widespread all over the buildings in 2008, and today even more so. And they would sit huddled around those TVs, fearful that their image would be in that group of the most wanted. She told me how one of her friends had actually been, his face came up, number 22. And he started running for his life. Every evening he would go from one place to the next. And in the end, that movement, it just became too much for anyone to bear. And he handed himself into the police. He then obviously went into detention. And there, one day the police officer came and handed him a note. And on that note, it told him for the first time that he'd been sentenced to 16 years in prison. He'd had no trial. He'd had no legal representation. That was the first he knew about it, being given this note. Now today we've had the privilege to march from Great Portland Street to here, Whitehall, which is the heart of the British government. This week in Tibet, we've seen the beginning of the Strike Hard campaign. A Tibetan person living in Lhasa cannot even enjoy the privilege of walking from here to the end of the road without being stopped, being asked to see their identification papers, questions about where are you going, who are you going to visit. So, as I started, I would thank each and every one of you for attending today and bearing witness to the situation inside Tibet. But there's a lot more to do, and I look forward to you all joining us. And Philippa will tell us a bit later about what you can do as an individual to help secure the rights of each and every Tibetan person living in Tibet. Thank you. Free Tibet!
Thank you, Stephanie. Could I just then ask Alex from SFT to come up and say a few words? Thank you.
I'm Alex from Students for a Free Tibet UK. I'm just here to talk to you briefly about the current political situation in this country and with our government. We all know that our government have recently changed their stance on Tibet and have acknowledged that Tibet is part of China. Now we need to continue to exercise our democratic rights in pushing Gordon Brown and David Miliband to support and promote the negotiations between the Tibetan government and the Chinese government. This is really important at the moment because the talks that keep happening keep coming back and nothing is moving forward. Recently, Lodi Gary has come back and said that there is a possibility of moving forward and that a joint study needs to be carried out between Tibetans and between Chinese government to understand why there is such a difference in attitudes around that table and what is happening and what they can do to move forward. Now we need to push our government and we need to push any other government that you're a part of to support actual studies, actual action, to make their currently empty words of support into actual words that have some meaning and have some future action for Tibetans and the Tibetan government in exile. This is something that you can exercise through your democratic right of asking your MP to lobby the government on, and this is what Philippa will talk to you about in a minute. I want to just remind you all that you have a democratic right and a freedom to do something about this that many people in the world, and especially in Tibet right now, do not have, and we need to support the Tibetan government in exile as much as possible by making our government accountable to their words of support that they have said that they will support the negotiations and that they support human rights in China and Tibet. Thank you.
Great. Great, thank you, Alex. If I could now introduce my fellow countryman Kamachura.